Shiny Pokemon, the very rare and very sought after phenomenon where a Pokemon sports a different color scheme. Being nothing more than just a rare occurrence that serves as mostly bragging rights, if you are lucky enough to find one, you hope you'd be able to catch it. There really isn't any bragging rights in, yeah, I found a shiny Geodude but it used self-destruct. But alas, sometimes fate, and especially RNG, can be cruel mistresses, for there is a list of Pokemon that can be found shiny at the standard shiny rates, and there's just nothing you can do to keep them. For most people, this would be a devastating blow. But for some others, the people that have been shiny hunting for such a long time, sometimes these hunts can be a fun way to just mix things up. The obligatory honorable mention for a list like this is always going to be when you run into a shiny Pokemon before you even get Pokeballs. This issue isn't super prevalent in the modern titles, but it is devastating to find a true proper shiny that you could be able to catch, but it just showed up a couple minutes too early. This could technically happen to you at any point in the game, if you just happen to run out of Pokeballs, but before you even have the chance, just stings in a way where it seems like the game is merely just taunting you. Oh hey, before we continue, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Doing so would be greatly appreciated, and it really does help out the channel. I think the best way to keep this list organized and not too confusing will be going game by game. So, in Ruby and Sapphire, the game starts out with you having to pick a starter Pokemon to help save Professor Birch from a wild Poochyena. And here we have one of the most common uncatchable shinies you can find, during the starter reset. In these games, if you want to reset for a shiny starter, you must choose your target and enter the battle with the wild Poochyena. And well, both Pokemon on the field have equal chance of being shiny. So while you could end up with a cool purple Mudkip, you could also end up facing down a golden dog that you either have to knock out or reset over. In Emerald version, it's almost the exact same scenario, but with a Zigzagoon instead of the Poochyena. So if you want a different flavor of heartbreak when looking for a shiny starter, you at least have options to choose from. Not too long after you get your starter in these games, you have to help Wally catch a Ralts, using one of Norman's Zigzagoon. Now, the Zigzagoon that Wally is given can be shiny, so if you're an Emerald, you can get two completely different shiny Zigzagoons that are completely uncatchable. But the Ralts Wally finds is also able to sparkle, and you can watch your rival catch this very rare shiny Pokemon, and the next time you meet, find that he swapped it out for a non-shiny version instead. So not only do you not get it, but the character that technically got it won't even use it. To round off our Hoenn adventures, we have the battle facilities in the Battle Frontier. The Battle Pike and the Battle Pyramid both feature wild Pokemon you can't keep, but can be shiny. Just an extra stinger when you end up failing your attempt at the facility due to some bad RNG. That's not even all, as the Battle Factory, the facility where you use rental Pokemon, can also have shinies in it. So that's a whopping 3 out of 7 facilities where you're not safe from these uncatchable shiny Pokemon. Also in this generation, we have Fire Red and Leaf Green, which has a few uncatchable shinies of its own. First up is the Weedle in the catching tutorial from the Old Man in Viridian City. He will find it, he will catch it, and you will never see it again. The TGTV also houses a catching tutorial, and it also can be shiny. There's also the Ghost Marowak in the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town. Once you get the Sylph Scope and can finally identify what the ghost is, it's possible that you will find the spirit of a shiny Marowak. And since this is a Pokemon that has already passed on, you aren't going to be catching it. And that wraps up the 3rd generation's uncatchable shinies. At least in the main games anyway. Once we reach Generation 4, it does start to lighten up a little, as shiny Pokemon become more officially talked about and become less of a kept secret in these games. The Sinnoh games, Diamond and Pearl, feature a starter setup very similar to that in Hoenn, this time forcing you into a battle with a Starly that could very well sparkle while it taunts you with its chirping. Add in that if you're restarting for a shiny starter, the resets here take far longer than in the Hoenn games, making this one maybe just a little bit more salt-inducing. The Battle Frontier returns in Platinum, as well as Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and this time, the shiny Pokemon are found on certain teams you can face against in the tower. Now, instead of being full odds chances like the previous entries, these are just set in stone. If you get given a specific opponent, they will have their shiny Pokemon. A fun detail, in my opinion, as it adds a little zest to these battle facilities, and it's cool to see shinies actually being used by other trainers in the games. Moving on to the 5th generation, we have one of the most unique uncatchable shinies you can see, and that's before you're even properly in the game. When you first start a save, you get given an introduction by the game's professor, and sometimes they'll bring out a Pokemon during their speech. Well, in Black and White, Professor Juniper sends out a Minccino, and this little fella can be shiny. In the sequels, Black 2 and White 2, the Minccino has now evolved into a Cinccino, but that's the only thing that's changed as it still sports the chance of being shiny. A very interesting situation, as this time, while you're hitting those full odds chance of seeing a shiny, this is hands down one of the most uncatchable of them all, given that it's in a cutscene before you're even properly in the game. In Black and White, when Juniper shows you how to catch a Pokemon, not only is she using a Minccino that can also be shiny, independently from the one in the intro, but the wild Patrat she comes across can also be shiny. Continuing on to Black 2 and White 2, Bianca's Lillipup and the wild purloin she catches in the catching tutorial can also both be shiny. Once we reach the 6th generation, we have our odds of finding shiny Pokemon doubled, meaning when your rival shows you your catching tutorial in X and Y, it's twice as likely now that either their Fletchling or the wild Bunnelby they catch will be shiny. At this point in the series, they're well into the trend of shiny locking Pokemon, so why these both can still be shiny is a bit of an enigma. However, once we reach Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they seem to finally have locked in. The wild Poochyena at the start of the game is shiny locked. No more accidents on the shiny starter resets. We also have the Ralts that Wally finds, and I believe this is shiny locked. I have seen people mention it can be shiny, but I have not seen anything concrete about it, so I'm going to assume that it is just locked. In Sun and Moon, the only uncatchable shiny is actually just a shiny Execute owned by a trainer you can battle. It's just a fun little side thing you can stumble across, and the trainer even gives you a bunch of nuggets after the battle. I wish there was just like a few more instances like this. Not the player getting bad luck, but a scripted moment that shows shinies exist without leading to a point of disappointment that your shiny luck got wasted on something that was out of your hands. In Sword and Shield, the only uncatchable shinies come in after the launch of the game. In the Isle of Armor DLC, there's an NPC that can show you dex entries, and it's entirely possible for what they show you to be shiny. Not a super big deal, as it's not like one you faced in a battle. But these games also had many events with the max raid mechanics, and some of them boasted boosted shiny odds. There was also events where they featured Pokemon that weren't catchable, like legendaries and mythicals. Early on, there was a Zero Aura raid event that let you battle, but not catch Zero Aura, and it was possible to fight shiny ones. The upside was that if enough of these raids were defeated by players worldwide, everybody would get a shiny Zero Aura through home, so it wasn't all lost. However, after the Isle of Armor DLC released, they did a similar event where you could fight G-Max Urshifu. Now these weren't advertised as having a semi-common shiny variant able to be fought, and some people happened across the very rare chance of finding a shiny one, which was completely uncatchable, and the shiny for the Cub Food line remains unreleased till this day, which just adds a little bit of extra salt into the wound. Our next stop brings us to the faithful remakes Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and faithful they are, as the Starly you fight at the start of the game is once again able to be shiny. Also, the wild Bidoof Dawn/Lucas encounters in the catching tutorial can be shiny. This one wasn't mentioned for the originals, and that is simply because I can't find info on whether it was or was not able to be shiny. I feel like it most likely was able to be shiny given how often the catching tutorials are able to have shiny Pokemon in them, but I simply can't find any evidence to support this belief. Finally, we have Scarlet and Violet, and they have a funny uncatchable shiny Pokemon situation. It is possible that the Pokemon Arven uses alongside you in the Titan fights could be shiny. Not only this, but during the Titan fights, it's possible for the Titans to roll as shiny without looking any different, and the only way to tell is by looking at your Pokedex to see if the shiny appears in it. A very funny 1-2 punch scenario of uncatchable shinies, and I think that covers the main games. But that's not all there is to go over in this franchise. Pokemon Colosseum on the GameCube has a very interesting relationship with shinies. In this game, you snag shadow Pokemon from other trainers, and due to how shininess is determined, a Pokemon that's shiny won't be shiny until after you snagged it. This is due to the secret IDs of the Pokemon needing to match up with the secret ID of the player. Also, the values of these Pokemon aren't set until you encounter them for the first time. And the NPC trainers also have their own secret IDs. Due to this, it is possible for a shadow Pokemon on an opponent's team to be shiny if it's in a rematch, and only in a rematch. But if you snag it now, it will no longer be shiny due to the Pokemon IDs lining up with the NPCs and not the players. Colosseum's sequel, XD Gales of Darkness, no longer features shiny shadow Pokemon. However, it still has some uncatchable shinies. This game features a side mechanic, the Battle CDs, which is a collection of challenge battles you can do. In these battles, you can use specific Pokemon in predetermined scenarios. However, the Pokemon you use are able to be shiny. A shiny you can't keep but at least get to use for a short period of time. Taking a hard pivot here, we land on Pokémon Rumble, which was a WiiWare game. In this game, you use toy Pokemon to battle through other toy Pokemon. The game does feature shiny Pokemon you can collect as you play through, but what we're here for is that in the game's credits, it'll show a bunch of Pokemon surrounding a podium, and these Pokemon are able to be shiny. As this is a cutscene, you have no control. You are powerless to watch as the camera pans around and a shiny comes and goes. Pokemon Battle Revolution is a battle simulator game, where you just, unsurprisingly, battle. Unless you have a Gen 4 game to import a team, you'll be using rental Pokemon. You can actually reset the rental team you get at the beginning of the game until you get one with a shiny, and it will remain permanently shiny. But that's kinda like obtainable. What we're after is the fact that your opponents in this game can have random shinies. Any match you do, you run the chance of getting an unobtainable shiny Pokemon. And due to not all Pokemon always being used for battle, sometimes you will only ever see it on the team preview screen. That's not all for this game, for there's also shiny costumes. That's right, costumes. This game features 6 costumes based on Pokemon that you can acquire by beating the various Colosseum leaders. However, there is the chance that the leader's costume will use the shiny coloring. Now you can obtain the shiny forms, but only if you haven't received the costume yet. That's right, if you already have the regular costume, you cannot get the shiny one. So if you want one, you have to constantly lose to the leader until you find them with the shiny one. So this is kind of like a middle ground one, as they are technically obtainable, but only if you don't already have the regular version. Our final set of entries on this list will be the various demos they used to release. In the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire demo, it's possible for the starter Pokemon you get to be shiny, but they don't actually change appearance. They'll have the shiny mark on their summary and will sparkle when sent out, but will have their regular colors. The downside of this is that not only is the starter locked to the demo, but once you progress far enough, the starter you pick gets replaced with a team of the 3 starters fully evolved. The Let's Go demo also features shiny Pokemon, as you can shiny hunt wild Pokemon and be all fine and dandy. However, you cannot save in this demo, thus any shiny you get will eventually be lost to the void. Also following in the footsteps of the Oras demo, the starters, Pikachu and Eevee, are not shiny locked but lack their shiny coloration. This one is even more interesting as these two are shiny locked in the full release, and are kinda separate forms of these Pokemon compared to the regular members of their species. Alright, that's quite a lot of uncatchable shinies, and I'm sure there's even more out there. This franchise is so large that it's so easy for stuff to end up being buried in the deep corners that you just don't have enough time to fully investigate every single little possibility. If I missed any uncatchable shinies, please let me know down in the comments below. And again, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or even subscribing. Both help out the channel tremendously. There's also the channel memberships, which grant you perks like special emotes and even some exclusive content. This has been Big Blast 99. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you have yourselves a goddamn good one.